Masechet Menaḥot, Daf Mem. On the previous daf, we saw a machloket about whether the mitzvah of sisit applies to garments other than wool and linen, like silk or nowadays cotton. But now we're going to learn the opinion of Bet Shammai, who surprisingly says that the mitzvah of sisit does not even apply to linen. Teno Rabbanan, Sadin, Besisit, Bet Shammai Potrin, Ubet Hillel Mechayevin, V'halacha Kedibre Bet Hillel. When you have a linen garment, with regard to sisit, Bet Shammai says, Patur, it is not required. Where does he get that from? There is a sifre that says, based on this pasuk, Gedilim Ta'aselach al arba karfot kesutecha. You have to put these tassels on, and the word for garment is kesut. And the sifre says that applies to wool only, according to Bet Shammai, and not linen. Or another explanation is, because these two Pesukim are back to back, Bet Hillel says that the Simuchim, this teaches us that even though shatnez is prohibited in general, it is permitted when you for the mitzvah of sisit. So Bet Shammai learns simuchin, and therefore he says the second pasuk teaches us that sisit overrides the prohibition of shatnez. That's Bet Hillel. Bet Shammai, however, disagrees. He says no, the law, the prohibition of shatnez applies across the board, even to sisit. Therefore, if you have a woolen garment, perfect. Woolen garment, you put woolen sisit on. The Tekhelet has to be made out of wool. So that's obligated. If you have a linen garment, however, then you have a problem, because your linen garment, how are you going to put the Tekhelet on it? You cannot, according to Bet Shammai, you cannot override shatnez even for sisit, and therefore there's no way to put Tekhelet of wool on a linen garment. It would be shatnez. And so that's the other explanation for the opinion of Bet Shammai. Bet Hillel says it is required to put sisit and Tekhelet on linen, and the halacha follows Bet Hillel. Amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Rabbi Sadok, v'alo kol hamatil Tekhelet b'Yerushalayim eno ela min hamatmihin. Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Sadok, challenges Bet Hillel. We have a tradition that anyone who wears Tekhelet on a linen garment in Yerushalayim causes others to be astonished. In other words, the rabbi said, do not wear a linen garment with Tekhelet in Jerusalem, because people are going to see it and they're going to say, oh, that's a linen garment. I see you connected this blue wool string on it. Oh, so shatnez, that's shatnez. And they'll think, therefore, that shatnez is permitted. They'll take it lightly, and cause people to be astonished. Now, this suggests that it's prohibited to have linen and linen garment with wool sisit, specifically the Tekhelet. It sounds like it's prohibited. Bet Hillel says it's required, permitted, and required. So how come in Jerusalem the sages said not to wear it if it's permitted? And the answer is, Amar Rabbi, Imken lama asaruha lefi she'en biki'in. Rabbi explains, if it's permitted according to Bet Hillel, then why did they tell people not to wear it in Jerusalem? Because people won't understand. Because people are not well versed. They don't know that shatnez is permitted for sisit. They don't know that distinction. And therefore, when the common people will see the scholars who are wearing a linen garment with woolen sisiot, specifically the wool string for the Tekhelet, they'll say, oh, that's shatnez. I guess shatnez is not a big deal. And then they'll go and wear shatnez in general, not for sisit. So we don't want to confuse people. It's difficult for common people to make that distinction. Usually, when something's not allowed, it's just not allowed. That's it, right? This is an unusual situation where such a serious prohibition as shatnez is permitted in the case of sisit. People aren't going to understand that distinction, and therefore we tell people, no, wear wool, and with wool, sisiot, do that in public, that's good. People will not get confused, but a linen garment with wool sisit, people will get confused. Even though Bet Hillel says absolutely it's required, and there's no mideoraita, there's no problem. of shatnez, but the rabbi said you should avoid it. Amar le Rava bar Rav Achana le Rava ve'lirmu be'asara ve'nifku leshuka u'mfar sema lemilata. So if it's just because people are ignorant about it, isn't there a way to teach people? So Rava, the son of Rav Huna, said to Rava, why don't we get 10 people to go and into the marketplace wearing linen with woolen sisiot, and then it will publicize the matter that they'll see, oh, this guy's doing it, that guy's doing it. They'll see 10 people, they're constantly walking around. There's respected people, and people ask, so what are you doing? Why are you wearing that? They'll see, if you see one person, you might say, oh, this guy, what is he doing? But if you see 10 people, then they'll learn the lesson. How come? Oh, they're all wearing sisiot. They'll see the pattern. So won't they learn that way? And the answer is no. Kol sheken de matmehu ilavan. The people will be even more astonished. If you see one person, you say, oh, maybe I didn't see correctly. You see 10 people wearing it, like, oh, shatnez. Everybody's wearing shatnez. I guess shatnez is no big deal. So if you get 10 people, they're not going to learn the careful distinction between sisit of shatnez and shatnez in general. They're just going to get even more confused. Okay, how about the rabbi teach it in the public lecture? You have the pirka on holidays. The sages would give public lectures. Everybody came, and they can give a whole shiur explaining it. So then they'll know it, right? No, gezerah mishum kala ilan. The rabbi still made a gezerah because of a blue dye called indigo. Here's an indigo plant. Here's the blue dye. And here's the problem. People may not use the proper tekhelet when dyeing the wool. Now, here's if you use the improper one on a wool garment. So we'll talk about it in a second. But if you have a linen garment and then you have you put tekhelet of wool, so good. If you have real tekhelet, proper tekhelet, you're fulfilling the mitzvah because you're fulfilling the mitzvah correctly. Therefore, does that override shatnez? However, if you're putting wool on a linen garment and you're not fulfilling tekhelet because it's actually a fake, a different dye, not real tekhelet, so then it's not the mitzvah of tekhelet, and now you're wearing shatnez without fulfilling the mitzvah of tekhelet, and then that would be shatnez. So that's why, even if we tell people and we announce in public and explain to them, listen, shatnez is permitted on sisit. Okay, fine. But then they're going to go and they're going to get indigo color, put it on the sisit, and then they'll be violating shatnez because that's not proper tekhelet. Okay, we ask about that, but why do you have to worry? Velo yeheh ela lavan. And even if it's just white, so white strings also are allowed. No, let's say you had a woolen garment and you had strings and you made one of them blue with indigo, the wrong color. Okay, so it's the wrong color. Fine, so just treat it like a white one. And if you had all white, it would be okay. As we said before, you have all white, you fulfill the mitzvah of sisit. You don't fulfill tekhelet, but you could fulfill the white. So this here also, to say it's a linen garment, and let's say the linen garment, I put wool, white strings. That's also permitted. So even if it's the wrong color, consider it like a white string, and therefore also the shatnez should be overridden by the basic mitzvah of sisit, even for white strings. And the answer is no. Since you can put linen strings on a linen garment, therefore you're not permitted to put woolen white strings on a linen garment. In other words, you're only allowed to violate shatnez if you have no choice, no other choice. So if you have a linen garment and you want to put actual tekhelet has to be wool, so there's no other way to fulfill the mitzvah of tekhelet except with wool. That's where we say that tekhelet overrides shatnez. However, if you're not putting tekhelet and you're just putting white or a wrong blue, that's not tekhelet, then since you can fulfill the mitzvah of sisit with white linen strings, therefore we do not allow a person to override shatnez. כדרש לקיש, דאמר יש לקיש, כל מקום שאתה עושה, עשה ולא תעשה, אם אתה יכול לקיים את שניהם מוטב. ואם לאו, יבוא עשה וידחה את לא תעשה. And Shakish teaches this principle. He says, anytime you have a mitzvah ta'aseh and a mitzvah lo ta'aseh, Here you have the mitzvah ta'aseh of sisit and Tekhelet, and the lo ta'aseh is shatnez. If you can fulfill both of them, then you should. If not, then the aseh overrides the lo ta'aseh. So the if not case here is if you have actual real Tekhelet, good. Then there's no way wool Tekhelet has to be wool. There's no way to fulfill it without overriding shatnez. So we override shatnez. However, if you don't have Tekhelet, so then you only have white. But you can fulfill white strings with linen garment with linen strings, and therefore you should not. You cannot override shatnez for that. And that's why we tell people not to wear Tekhelet in Jerusalem on a linen garment, because we're afraid, even if you teach them, it's allowed in tzitzit, it's not allowed for any other garment. So they know the difference between shatnez in general and that tzitzit overrides, but they might go ahead and get indigo blue strings, and that indigo blue strings is just considered like white, and you're not allowed to put wool white strings on a linen garment, and so that's why we make a gezerah not to wear linen garments with wool tzitzit at all in public. Ve'libdekuha. Now we say, why not test the strings? Anytime someone has a linen garment with blue, we'll go and test it and make sure it's actually Tekhelet and not indigo. So tell everybody to go test the strings to make sure. Let them know. Ela gezerah mishum te'aima. Okay, you know what? A new answer. The reason why we make a gezerah is because of testing. Even if you have proper Tekhelet, that Tekhelet has to be made for the sake of the fulfillment of the mitzvah. If one made a vat of dye, and then he took some just for testing. So now that's only for testing material. He put it back, and then the rest he put back in. Or he made that whole batch just as testing, not for the sake of a mitzvah. Well, then if you end up using it for a mitzvah, it's no good. And so now you have a Tekhelet. It is in fact from a snail. It's made properly, except not for the sake of the mitzvah. So therefore, it's actually unfit. If you would put that on a linen garment, you have a linen garment with a wool string, but the wool string is not actually proper Tekhelet because it was not made for the mitzvah. And therefore we tell people, and there's no way to test it afterwards because it is Tekhelet. I mean, it is from a snail. So there's no way to know if it was done with proper intention or improper intention. And therefore we tell people, do not wear wool Tekhelet on linen at all. Okay, why don't we send out letters that the dye producers for Tekhelet should use, if it's used for testing, then you should tell them you can't use that to actually make tzitzit. Let them know in a letter that it's okay to do a test, but if you're doing a test, make sure to throw that out and use it for something else. Don't use it for tzitzit. And then they'll make sure when they're actually dyeing tzitzit strings, they'll use a batch that's made for the sake of a mitzvah and not for testing. Can't we send a letter and tell people rather than have to make a whole gezerah and that now nobody can wear linen garments with Tekhelet? We ask about that. Can you really rely on a letter? I mean, who knows? Is a letter going to get there? Is someone going to forge the letter? Are they going to follow what it says in the letter? Amarava hashta chames pesach v'yom kippurim dekaret v'samchinan adiske hacha de'aseh be'alma lo kol sheken. And Rava says, yes, of course you can rely on letters. When it comes to chametz and pesach and Yom Kippur, we rely on letters. How so? With the Bet Din would send letters when there's a new moon. When in Yerushalayim, the witnesses come, they declare a new moon. How do they tell people? They send letters all around to all the different cities to say, this was Rosh Chodesh, and now, 10 days from now is going to be Yom Kippur. 15 days from now is going to be Pesach. Now, Pesach, Chametz on Pesach, or Yom Kippur is a prohibition of karet. And yet we rely on letters, and people will know. They don't have to, in Israel, you don't have to keep 2 days, because maybe they didn't get the letter, maybe they misread the letter, maybe the letter was forward. We don't worry about that. We rely on letters even for serious prohibitions of karet. Here, it's only an aseh, all the more so that we should rely on letters. And then, if we relied on letters to tell the dye makers what to do, then we would not need to make a blanket prohibition against linen garments with Tekhelet. Ela amar Rava hamileta amari v'temar b'ma'arava mishum d'Rabbi Zera kevati shema yikara sedino betoch shalosh v'itperenu v'atorah amra ta'aseh v'lo min ha'asui. Rava says a new consideration altogether. This matter I said it, and then also in the West, in Eretz Yisrael, it was said in the name of Rabbi Zera, as like I said. So Baruch Shekivanti, so both Rava and in Israel Rabbi Zera said the same thing. So that's double witnesses. And here's the problem. We are worried that, let's say you have a linen garment, good, and you put tzitzit on it, Tekhelet, with wool, okay, all good, proper. Bet Hillel says, right, that's totally kosher, totally valid. But here's the worry. The garment might get a rip in it within three finger breadths from the corner, and then someone will come and will sew it up. And then it will be a problem because the Torah says ta'aseh. You have to first have a complete garment, and then you have to put the tzitzit on the complete garment. What you're not allowed to do is have a corner. Let's say you just have a corner, and you put the tzitzit on that corner, on a little patch, and then attach the patch to a garment. That is prohibited. That is no good. So, because that is, it's done, by retroactively, right? It's done. You have to ta'aseh. You have to actually tie the tzitzit onto the garment when the garment is all intact. So, just like you can't take a little swatch, put a tie tzitzit on it, and then sew the swatch onto a big garment. So too, if you have a garment and you did everything properly, you have the garment, you made the hole, you put tzitzit, you tied the tzitzit, it's kosher. But now, if it gets a tear around the corner, now it's no longer a garment. So now that you sew it up, okay, you sewed it up, but now it turns out the tzitzit is min ha'asui. It's already prepared and then being attached to the garment because it was torn. So it's like it wasn't attached. And so therefore, we're worried about that. Now, why aren't you worried about that in general? Well, in general, if you have wool and wool, okay, so it's okay, even if it's ta'aseh v'lo min ha'asui, and that's a problem because you didn't fulfill your mitzvah of tzitzit in that way, but still you didn't violate shatnez. Okay, so the worst comes to worst, you're not fulfilling tzitzit, but you didn't violate shatnez if it's a wool garment with wool strings. But if you have a linen garment with wool strings, especially the Tekhelet, the string, that's wool. So if you did everything properly, okay, you're good. It's not shatnez, according to Bet Hillel. However, it could be that it'll tear. A lot of times things tore. Nowadays, something tears, but we probably would throw it out. But in those days, they would certainly fix everything. And so eventually it'll tear. You're going to sew it up. It turns out that Tekhelet is not valid as mitzvah tzitzit. If it's not valid as mitzvah tzitzit, then it's a prohibition of shatnez. And so that's why we have to worry about it. And so we tell people, do not wear linen garments with wool Tekhelet, because it may come to a time when it will tear, and then you will fix the corner, and it will be invalid tzitzit, and you will have a violation of shatnez. Shera Rabbi Zera lesedine. Rav Zera amar, maybe Rabbi Zera amar, gezera nameh mishum kesut laila. Rabbi Zera undid his sisiyot from his linen cloak because he didn't want to come to a violation like this. And so people will see, oh look, there's a Tekhelet on here, so it's okay. But there's so many problems that can come from putting wool sisiyot on linen, so he actually undid it. And further he said, gezerah, I am worried because of a nighttime garment. At night, there's no mitzvah of tzitzit. So if there's no mitzvah of tzitzit at night, let's say you have a linen garment and you're going to wear it at night, and it has a wool sisiyot on it. Well, since there's no mitzvah of tzitzit at night, so now you're not fulfilling a mitzvah, then you're violating shatnez. You're wearing a linen garment with wool attached to it. And the wool is not there for a mitzvah at night. And so therefore, at night, he would use this. So he actually undid the sisiyot, and that way he has a plain linen garment, and he can't wear it during the day because it has no tzitzit on it, or unless you put on linen tzitzit, then that would be okay. But without tzitzit on it, at least he could wear it at night. Otherwise, if he left the wool on it, then he would be violating shatnez at night. Ve'amar Rava, Hamileta Amari v'temar ve'amar Rava mishmet Rabbi Zera kevati. Now we mentioned one law that Rava said, and also in Israel they said the same thing. Now we mention another related law that Rava said, and then he heard that in Israel, Rabbi Zera said the same thing. He shel beged uchnafeha shel or hayevet. If you have a garment that's made out of cloth, regular cloth, but the corner is made out of leather. It's a nice fancy garment. You attach a leather square corner onto a regular garment. It's obligated in tzitzit because we follow the majority of the garment. The garment itself is made out of wool, so the fact that the corner isn't, yes, you're attaching the tzitzit to the corner, but what defines the garment is not the corner, but rather the rest of it. He shel od uchnafeh shel beged petura, my tama ikar beged ba'inan. And the other way around, if you had a garment made out of leather, a nice leather coat, and has four corners, but the corners are made out of wool, then you do not put tzitzit on it. Why? Because we follow the main part of the garment in order to define it. A leather garment does not require tzitzit, and therefore, even though the corner is made out of wool, it does not require tzitzit. Rav Achai azil batar kanaf. Rav Achai, however, disagreed and said, no, since the Torah says that you attach the tzitzit on the kanaf, on the corner, therefore, according to him, the corner defines whether it needs tzitzit or not. So according to him, if you have a leather corner, you don't need the tzitzit. However, if it's a wool corner or a linen corner, then you would be liable to put tzitzit on it. Amar Rava, Amar Rav Sechora, Amar Rav Huna, Hitile ba'alat shalosh, vishlima le'arba pesula, ta'aseh ve'lo min ha'asui. Since we mentioned the rule that you have to add the tzitzit to a finished garment and not finish the garment after the tzitzit are there, we have another application of that in the name of Rav Huna, that if someone had a three-cornered garment, there's only three corners, the last corner was not finished yet, and he put tzitzit on the three corners, and then he finished the garment, he added material, and now you have the fourth corner, and he added it to the fourth corner. That is invalid because ta'aseh, you have to add the tzitzit to a garment that's complete, and not retroactively that you put the tzitzit on first and then it becomes a garment after, a four-corner garment afterwards, then it's invalid. Me'tibeh, we challenge Rav Huna's law from a baraita that says, Chasidim arishonim kevan she'argu ba'shalosh hayu matilin la Tekhelet. The pious ones from early generations, when they were weaving a garment, once they had three finger breadths, they put it on the loom, and they have three finger breadths, so they have like two corners, just the beginning of a garment, they already would put Tekhelet on it. You see, they were so eager not to leave the garment even for 1 second without tzitzit, so they put it on, and then they continued to weave, and they finished the rest of the garment. So first of all, this is not even big enough to require tzitzit, and also, the garment is not complete. So, you see, it's permitted. They did it. So, what about the problem of ta'aseh v'lo min ha'asui? So, this is a challenge to Rav Huna. And the answer is, Ema kevan shepas'u ba'shalosh hayu matilin la Tekhelet. We change one word, not argu, not that they weaved three finger breadths, but rather they completed the last three finger breadths. The meaning is, as soon as they completed weaving it, they immediately put on the Tekhelet. They didn't put it on the side and leave it around. Maybe someone will, by mistake, wear it before it has Tekhelet on it. So that's what it means. But in fact, they would agree with the ruling of Rav Huna. Now we challenge again. Do we really apply this principle to tzitzit? Hitil lemutelet keshera. Rabbi Zera says, let's say you have a garment with tzitzit, kosher tzitzit, everything's fine. And then someone comes and adds another set of tzitzit onto a corner. Now there's two of them, and then he removes the old one. He wants to maybe change it out, but he doesn't want to leave it without, so he adds another second one onto it. That is valid. Now, why would you say that's valid? If he adds one at the time, right now, before he puts on the second one, it's valid. It's a kosher sisit. When he puts on a second fringe onto a corner, that is not necessary. It's not fulfilling any mitzvah because the mitzvah already is there. In fact, we'll see in a second, he might even violate Bal Tosif. Okay, but right now, it's just adding strings to it. It's not fulfilling a mitzvah. And then afterwards, when he removes the original sisiot, well, then it turns out that after having removed it, okay, so now the second one kicks in, but it's kicking in only after it was already attached. And we just said that you have to attach it to a garment that requires sisiot. And now you have a garment that doesn't require it because the CC is already on it. And it only becomes required for the second one when you remove the first one, but then it's already attached. So you see from here, that we do not apply the principle of ta'aseh v'lo min ha'asui to sisit. That's the question. It seems that that's the true according to the Bizera. Amar Rava, hashta bebal tosif ka'eh ma'aseh lahaveh. Rava says, actually, you are. This is okay. This is not a case of ta'aseh v'lo min hasui. It's not a case of min hasui. It actually is ta'aseh. How do you know? Because when you add an extra tzitzit to a corner, one violates Bal Tosif. You're not allowed to put 5 on them, 6 on them. You can't put double on a corner. And since you violate Bal Tosif, that means that action is significant. If it wasn't significant, if you were just adding random things, then you'd not be liable to Bal Tosif. You're only liable to Bal Tosif if you're doing a halachically significant action. And therefore we see that although one violates Bal Tosif, but actually, one can only violate Bal Tosif if you consider that sisit that you added as adding it to a garment. And so therefore, it is, in fact, you did violate Bal Tosif. But once you remove the original one, now you have a proper sisit because you added it to a garment. The garment was all there. It didn't require more sisit. You put on more sisit. That's a significant act, significant enough to violate Bal Tosif, and also significant enough to be considered adding CC to a garment, ta'aseh, and it's not considered mina asui. So there's no challenge from the Bizera. Matkif la Rapapa. Rapapa is going to challenge only the Bal Tosif, although he'll agree that it's ta'aseh and that the sisit are kosher. Mimai de gabra le'osufe kamikaven. Dilma lebatule kamikaven. Ubal Tosif leka maaseh ika. Says, how do you know that the person, when he added an extra sisit onto a corner, that he wanted to violate Bal Tosif? How do you know his intention was, I'm going to say, the Torah says 4, I'm going to say 5. Maybe his intention actually was to nullify the original strings. And so in his mind, he says, no, these strings I'm not considering sisit. So he's not coming to add, he's coming to replace. And then he'll physically replace it. But in his mind already, he was not adding. So therefore, he would not violate Bal Tosif. And the ma'aseh, the action that he did, an active action, not passive, is kosher because he's nullifying the first one in his mind and he's adding the second one. So there's no Bal Tosif, and it is a significant action, and it is kosher sisiot. Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Matana Amar Shmuel. So we just had Rabbi Zera said that if you add a second one onto a garment that's already there, it's valid. And now Rabbi Zera says something else in the name of Shmuel. Tekhelet en ba mishum kilayim va'afilu betalit petura. That blue strings, there's no problem of blue strings. Even if you add it to a talit, to a garment, that does not require CCR. That's what we've been dealing with other cases. If you add Tekhelet to a wool garment, for sure it's okay. If you add a wool Tekhelet to a linen garment, so there, Bet Shammai says it was a problem. But Bizera says in the name of Shemuel that even if you add it to a garment that doesn't require sisit, Tekhelet has a special law that Tekhelet is exempt from the problem of kilayim. Now, my talit petura. What case is it talking about when it mentions this example of talit petura? Maybe it's a very small garment that does not require sisit. A very small garment does not require sisit. And this chidush is, even though it doesn't require sisit, If you put Tekhelet on it, it's a linen garment, and you put wool Tekhelet, still, there's no problem of kilayim. Is that the case he's talking about? Can't be, because look at this baraita. V'atanya, talit she'akatan mitkaseh bo, rosho ve'erubo. Ve'hagadol yoseh ba, yederech aray, chayevet besisit. This baraita is telling us the minimum size of a garment to require sisit. If you have a sisit that's big enough that a child can cover his head and most of his body with it, and also that an adult sometimes uses it. It's not adult size, but even an adult, once in a while, he can't find his regular garment, he might wear it. That is liable to sisit. That's above the minimum. However, if it's smaller than that, and akata mitkaseh bo rosho v'rubo af al pi shegadol yoseh ba aray petura v'chen linan kilayim. However, it's so small, if it's so small, that even a child cannot cover his head and most of his body with it, even if an adult might use it once in a while temporarily, still you're not required to put tzitzit on it. It has to be something that the adult is wearing. So he's wearing it, but temporarily, and so small, it's smaller than a child size, doesn't require tzitzit. Good, that's one law. And here's the key for us. It says, and also regarding kilayim. What does that mean also regarding kilayim? Let's examine. We analyzed this baraita and wondered, what does this last line mean when it says this law is true also for kilayim? Perhaps it means that this is true also for the prohibition of kilayim. In other words, that just like if a garment is small and therefore it does not require sisit, also if it's small, one is not liable to kilayim. The idea is that because it's so small, people don't generally wear it. And an adult who wears it would only be temporary wearing. And since it's only temporary wearing, and it's so small, that makes it not liable to tzitzit, and it also makes it not liable to kilayim. With the idea that the idea would be that one is liable to kilayim only for wearing a garment regularly. But if you wear a garment only once in a while, occasionally, then it's not called really wearing and not liable to kilayim. Is that what this means? V'chen linan kilayim? It can't be, because there's a Mishnah in kilayim that says v'hanan tenan and aray b'kilayim. There's no exemption for temporary wearing when it comes to kilayim. Even if I'm wearing it just for a few minutes and it's not my regular garment and I don't usually wear it, still, if it's kilayim, I would be liable. So, therefore, this line cannot mean v'chen linan kilayim, that is not required, that is there's no liability of kilayim if it's small. Rather, it must actually mean the opposite, that if it's small, one is liable to kilayim. And then it would mean as follows. If a garment is big enough that it requires tzitzit, even though the adult doesn't usually wear it, but it's big enough that a child could wear it and the adult sometimes wears it, then it's liable to tzitzit. Since it's liable to tzitzit, then there's no problem of kilayim, because tzitzit overrides kilayim. But if it's smaller than the required size, it's smaller than the child size, then it does not require tzitzit. If it does not require tzitzit, then do not put on blue wool Tekhelet, because then one would be liable to kilayim. That's the proper reading of this baraita. And we can support this reading from another statement about that baraita. V'amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak v'chen linyan sadin besisit. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said about this baraita that not only v'chen linyan kilayim is also true regarding a linen garment when it comes to sisit. So it would be the same thing. If it's a garment that's bigger than a child size, even though it's not quite an adult size, and it's made out of linen, you can put wool on it, wool sisiot on it. That's okay. And if it's smaller, then it would not be allowed, because it would be kilayim. So we see that from this baraita, if something is smaller than the proper size, it is still liable in kilayim. So therefore, when Rabbi Zerah said in the name of Shemuel that Tekhelet, there's no problem of kilayim, even if it's a talit petura, a talit petura can't mean a small garment that's patur from sisit, and there's no kilayim, because we just showed that a garment that's too small to require sisit is liable to kilayim. So it can't be he's talking about that. So rather, what is he talking about? Elamai petura hitil lemutelet. That it means the garment that's exempt is talking about a garment that already has sisiyot on it. It's a kosher garment, and then you add sisiyot to it already. Let's say the second set of sisiyot that you add to it it's a linen garment, and you add another set of wool Tekhelet onto it. So that's what he's saying. That Tekhelet, there's no problem of kilayim, even if it's a garment that already has sisiyot on it, and so therefore it doesn't require more sisiyot. But if you did put more sisiyot on it, there's no problem of kilayim. That's what he was talking about. And this would fit with what Rabbi Zera said over here, that if you add a second set of sisiyot and you take off the first, it's kosher because the second ones that you put on is considered proper placement of sisiyot on a garment that's already there, and therefore it's kosher because it's proper placement. Also, it can be Tekhelet, wool on linen, and you would not be a problem of kilayim. And so you see this fits with what Rabbi Zera said earlier. So we ask finally, V'ha amara Rabbi Zera hadazimna. Well, Rabbi Zera already told us in that first statement that adding a second set is proper sisiyot. And now he just said again, basically the same thing, that there's no problem of kilayim. Why is there no problem of kilayim? Because adding that second set is a proper addition. That's why there's no kilayim. So he said the same thing twice. Why? And the answer is actually Rabbi Zera did not say both of these statements. He said only one. And the other one we derived by inference. And so this is an important point. Sometimes when we quote a sage in the Gemara, it doesn't necessarily mean that Amorah said those words explicitly. Sometimes it could be that he said one law, and then the sages, later apply it to a second instance and quote him as saying, yes, he said this in this case, even though he didn't say literally those words, but rather we derived it only by inference. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen v'Amen.